Thank you very much, and good afternoon, everybody. I'm broadcasting from Bibury in the Cotswolds. I've been locked down for far too long, and probably a little bit cabin fever has set in, let's say that. But while I'm talking to you this afternoon, I want to just cover how the history of change happens. There tends to be that pattern over my shoulder. An order, it's then thrown into disarray, and then there's a reordering of things for a time until there's more disorder. But I think there's something ever so interesting about looking at this time that we're going through. Whether it's climate change, where we had an order and it got thrown into disarray with understanding about how we're treating the climate, our planet, plastics, etc. There's an argument about fossil fuel versus electricity. And before we know it, there's conflict, ambiguity, ownership, loss, selfishness, protection, genuine keenness to make change happen, and then a reordering of things. Black Lives Matter caused something similar. Things thrown into chaos, into disorder, into question, and then in the future, we'll find a new order. People will own the new order. But what it means really is, COVID the same, we go through this pattern. In the disorder, some people come out better than others. Some people make more constructive use of time. Some people find new keys, new innovations than others. And it depends on the kind of state we keep ourselves in during the disorder. I don't suppose every politician is a self-serving egotist who wants to make their selfish order come true. Some of them must be decent with proper plans and neat ideas, but none of them lack haters. So there's a sense in which as soon as you come up with an idea which is going to be useful in the reordering, as worthy as it might be, as properly interested and authentic as it might be, you'll always face challenge. Therefore, we need the big R word in here when we're going through chaos. That word that's the buzzword all over the place, resilience. And I'm just trying to unpick where resilience comes from. Because if we can keep ourselves in a state of grace and kindness and decency, cool-headedness, calmness, then we'll be in better place to handle ourselves well in the disorder and own some of the stuff in the reordering. So 2020 has been a chance to reset ourselves, reset our relationship with our families, our relationship with time, with money, with our customers, the business we do. And the word crisis that we hear so much comes from a Greek word spelt with a K. And its etymology is, it's a time when we're invited, challenged to make a proper decision and to reevaluate things, and for the good. I didn't think I could mention crisis without mentioning China somewhere along this spectrum of conversation. But in Cantonese, if a Cantonese reader reads these two characters, they're reading the word crisis. If I see 6 letters of crisis, it evokes for me, the meaning of that word. But for a Cantonese reader, the first character means chaos or danger, imminent. And the second character, well, it's debatable. Some people say it means opportunity. Other people say that's too positive a reading, but it means turning point. But I love the notion of looking at a crisis and seeing straight away the heat, the pressure, but also the opportunity. And we've been invited to do this all the way through. Arthur Ashe, the tennis player, put it rather well. He said, in the end, in any situation, all you can do is control the controllables. And isn't that really the answer? Start where, this is Captain Tom, isn't it? It became Colonel Tom. Start where you are, in my garden. Use what you have, a Zimmer frame. Do what you can. I'll try 100 laps. But there's something else here. William Blake, the poet, put it rather well. See, I think there's something about momentum. I think happiness is about momentum. It's not really about arrival, but it's about us moving towards something that we cherish the notion of. And sometimes people get stuck. If you've ever met somebody who's completely, well, let's say cynical and sarcastic as soon as we start, as soon as you offer an idea, propose something which you think is constructive, as soon as somebody knocks it down and gets into that place. See, I think we meet people who just get in a pattern. And you know the type I mean, and it becomes rather predictable. They get validation from criticising and knocking. And I don't think that person gets home on a Friday evening and says to their partner, "Ha ha, honey, I'm home. I've been a cynical bastard all week. but now it's the weekend, I'll be all kind and polite to you and the children, and then go back to being a tosser again on Monday morning. That's not how it works. We get into patterns and rhythms and routines psychologically, and there's something ever so important about making sure we don't get stuck. And I think there's something to celebrate, therefore, when we go into a time of chaos and challenge, because it stirs the water up and gives us all a question or two to answer. So I think we can celebrate these things, and actually maybe that's a proper way of knowing this. But in the end, our knowledge is often passive, and we really don't understand something until we've tried and used it. I don't think we think our way out of a crisis or strategize our way. It's about action, and in the action, the true learning comes. So I don't like to drop names, as I said to the Queen the other day, but I did have a conversation with Manchester United, or a few actually, when they won the Champions League, and in the 1990s. And so Alex Ferguson used to say that was the family motto in his home in Glasgow. You always have to know that it's going to be sweeter after the difficulty. And he'd make the team train particularly hard and extra long. And then when they were exhausted, they'd have to do it again. And then when they were really complaining, set up for free kicks now. Why? Because the time you'll need a free kick to go in is not when you're fresh, it's when you're absolutely spent. And there's the work. It will taste sweeter after difficulty. So I think there's something ever so important about how we might bear some of these things in mind, because it's not masochistic to say that when we really start to go through something challenging, we've got to know there will be benefits and that we will be stronger afterwards. And somebody is going to do it anyhow. So I've been thinking over lockdown about 5 qualities, which I'd like to expand upon at a later date. But the 5 things we need from our leaders if we're going to get through the times of disorder. And the first one, see, I've been locked down too long, I'm writing Superman logos on flip charts. But the first one I want to say is how we manage our state, how we keep ourselves in a state of composure and kindness and grace and cool-headedness so that we can make good decisions. I think when you feel bad, you make bad decisions. When you feel good, you make better ones. So our state really matters, and that's our first priority. And I think there's a secret. How do we do that? Stepping into each room we step into, not casually, but to step into a room and just to catch ourselves for a moment. What's the best outcome? How can I be best for the people in this room? What's the intention I take into this room that can serve them? And let myself align myself with that before and get properly centered before I go in there and give all I can. Rather than just drifting into one place undeliberately, I think managing our state's a really key thing. I think actually that thought comes from Elvis. Elvis Presley in the latter years of his life when he was so overweight, sweating with every stride, and his life in tatters, Priscilla's gone and he's taking drugs. It's the end game for him. Even Elvis would ask his entourage, could you park my trailer 100 yards away from the entrance of the theatre that I'm going to be stepping into to do this concert? And because he reckoned he'd get his life together in 100 strides and make that deliberate walk himself into a place of resourcefulness so that he burst. But the thing is, as he burst onto the stage, he said what he'd been thinking about was the people in the room and how far they'd travelled and what they wanted from this celebratory, phenomenal night. And he said, once I got that in mind, I disappeared. The ego, the self-consciousness goes. I think there's something about one of the powerful ways of managing our state is to think of others and to think about what they need. That's not meant to be some kind of big selfless message, but I think it's ever so important. I did a talk to Brain Tumour UK a few years ago. 60 people with a brain tumour. 60 people came to the room. 30 of them had a tumour, which would see them pass within 3 months, and the other 30 were holding the hands of somebody they loved, and they didn't know how they were going to say goodbye to them. And I was asked by a gentleman called David if I would approach this group really positively. He said, Marcus, when you walk into the room, you're going to see a lot of head bandages and people lolling and some tears. But don't be put off by it. It's not a pity party, and they don't want your sympathy. What we want from you is ideas about how you can sustain positivity right to the end, because they come because they're hopeful and they think that they can finish this thing well. And so don't you be downbeat. Cheery is the name of it. So I turned up there, and I've been briefed by David several times, a very kind man, coordinator of the Southeast at Brain Tumour UK. And when I met him, he was in a fine suit, shaking hands with people, making sure they had a place to sit and got tea and coffee and being absolutely cheer on legs. And then he looked at me, and I guess he noticed the look on my face. He said, "Oh, Marcus, I didn't tell you, did I? I'm ever so sorry. I've got this too." And there he was with a huge scar across his forehead. He said, "I'll be gone in a fortnight. But do you know, this has been keeping me together. This is keeping me, I've been looking forward to this event so much, and it's going to be a fantastic event. So thank you ever so much for coming, and let's get started." And I thought, wow, maybe there is something in that. Maybe that is the skill, or the best way of making sure we're good. Making sure we're focusing on other people, not ourselves. But a couple of other things to say. I think it's ever so important for us to be positive, be really upbeat, bright-sided. We know that the internet exhorts us to be positive all the time. But what I really mean by here is something about deep rational optimism, really. It's Stockdale paradox. If you ever came across that in psychology, that's Admiral Jim Stockdale, sent to Vietnam in the Hanoi Hilton for 8 years between 1975 and 63. And he suffers torture, 20 proper bouts of torture. And he sees it as his duty to help the men under his command as the senior officer to manage to withstand torture and not give away the key secrets that the Viet Cong wanted. And so he suffered sustained, enduring torture, and taught the men how to just give away some secrets that we can dispose of, but keep the crown jewels. And effectively, it was a successful mission. Anyhow, when he was released, he was asked the question, "How did you survive?" And he didn't know how to answer it. The psychologist is posing the question, and he's dumbfounded. "Well, was it because you're optimistic?" He said, "No, the optimist died." The optimists, they said things like, "Hope for Christmas, wait for Christmas, believe in Christmas." And when Christmas came and went, "Well, believe in Easter, picture being with your family at Easter. They're restless by then." He said they died of a broken heart. Here's the paradox. He said the people who really survive have a deep, enduring belief that they will prevail. Right in your system, a deep faith. We have to believe that we're going to make it. And it will be sweeter after difficulty. It's just that we have to act as though it's very unlikely. So you have to embrace the gritty hardship of the situation you're in and win by playing the game of inches. And we can't duck it. You can't say, like Trump did, COVID's going to go away, just to bury your head in the sand. It's not going to. The only way we're going to make it is if we believe we'll prevail, but at the same time behave as though it's really unlikely and get working hard, grafting into finding ways of making vaccines work, etc. But there it is. It's the Premier League manager saying, we're not talking about winning the Premier League, we're playing one game at a time. It's Muhammad Ali saying, think like a winner, believe deep down, but act like a contender. I suppose it's that really where I live. We will prevail. We will have delicious moments of celebration again. It is going to come. It's just that you have to act with the bulldog determination spirit of the moment, which is properly embracing the grit of the situation. That's what I really mean. But I also mean that you have to set the ambition really strong. We have to have an ambition, a proper intention, and I think entrepreneurs just find ambition and goals and destinations and new places to aim for faster than others. And that's what sets them apart, actually. Proper leaders who just see the chance, see the opportunity, and don't hang about. Start planning and getting stuck in. But I don't mean that ambition's a selfish thing. I don't think it's an ego trip. It comes from a medieval word, which was about nobility walking their ambit. As a noble, your duty is to make sure that once a year you walk the extremity of the territory that you are steward over and make sure that the peasants are happy. Sit down, metaphorically have a cup of tea with them and find out if they're okay. See what you can do for them. Look after them. Because, by the way, if you don't look after them, then your territory is not going to grow very far because eventually there'll be disorder and pitchforks, etc. But I think if we take that as it's really intended, the only way to be successful is to make sure other people are successful deep down. Best way to be a success is to help others be successful. And there's a spirit in that which I really admire. Also, I love the thought that we need belief, confidence. But that comes from a Latin word, confidere, which literally means total trust. So if you've got total trust in yourself, you're self-confident. But this is about us bringing other people with us and having confidence in them, believing they can be furloughed, they can work from home, and they can make it. In the end, we have to do what Hemingway said. The best way to find out if you can trust somebody is to trust them. Throw the kitchen. I'm fed up with hearing leaders of businesses saying, we've taken on a new marketing director, we've taken on a new R&D director, and say, well, how are they getting on? Well, the jury's out. What do you mean the jury's out? You've taken them on, haven't you? The job is to absolutely massively support them, throw everything behind them, completely support them, totally trust them. And if they break your trust, oh well, then you found out. But people fly much better if you really are behind and beneath and lifting. So, and the last word, it's been the word of COVID for me, actually. There's so many times when I win awards, which sometimes happen when they haven't got anyone else to give them to, they say to me, they say things like, this is Marcus Child, the Tigger of the chief executive community here. Or this man's got Duracell batteries. We felt energized by his presentation. I've been doing stuff all through lockdown, of which I've been offering new ideas. I read a lot. I got a distinction from Cambridge. I consider myself to be an academic. And I say all these things and try and make them in really simple, crisp terms. But anyway, I give all the stuff and they say, yeah, thank you very much, Marcus. Energizing. I said, what about the idea though? What about that concept, that model? Yeah, energizing. That's all they say. And I'm looking forward to your feedback, by the way. But energizing is what they say. I think, well, how about that? But I think actually it's a massive word. I think it's worth its weight in gold. I just think there's something massive about the zest for life and the enthusiasm for an idea that somebody might have, and how infectious and energizing, boosting, nourishing that can be for others. And I don't think this is about us necessarily being extra with our energy, but it's maybe a slow burn, deep, determined energy which pulls us through and enables us to prevail. But a last thought, because I know times are pressing. I read a book years ago called The New Alchemists by Charles Handy. And Charles Handy, it's a very small contact group, this. Charles Handy lives within the M25 around London, and he's rather elderly at this stage, so he decides he's just going to study entrepreneurs who live within the M25. But he said that it was a moment, it was an epoch in the 90s where the zeitgeist of entrepreneurial behavior was absolutely thriving. So this book concentrates on people like, they were all in the same place at the same time. How about this? Oswald Boateng, the tailor, Richard Branson, Dee Dawson, who set up the first anorexic clinic, Terence Conran was there, Charles Dunstan, Rose Fenton and Lucy Neal, who ran the International Festival Theatre. There's a lovely one, Jane Chewson, who started Comic Relief, and there's Julian Richer and Tim Waterstone, and just an astonishing star-studded cast. But he wants to know, what have these people got in common? And one of the things he finds they've got in common is he describes them as, they see themselves as fleas on elephants. We call these people disruptors these days. But in the 90s, he said a lot of them have got an elder sibling, or they're a middle sibling at least, and they've got this need to prove themselves. It's a bit like imposter syndrome. People have that, don't they? I think it's okay to have it, quite honestly, because it's Stockdale again. If you ever took the job and you feel like you're an imposter, well, you didn't take the job because you didn't think you could do it. Deep down, you believed you could. But some days you wake up thinking, I'm not sure I'm good enough. And that to me is hunger and thirst and not complacency. And that gets us through. I think it's fine, actually. It's the two in balance again. Don't overdo the balance in terms of worrying too much. But I think there's a healthy need, the pleasure of pressure, as I might want to call it. But the second thing is, he calls it doggedness. He says, passion generates energy and the capacity for hard work just as well, because hard work, determination and tenacity are all needed. Jane Chewson said, don't make it sound easy, it isn't. Nevertheless, when it's your own creation, when it's your own ambition, and other people want to buy into it and feel like they're part of something bigger than themselves, then it hardly seems like work. A Benedictine monk has asked the question, what's the antidote to exhaustion? And his answer, not necessarily rest. The antidote to exhaustion is wholeheartedness, doing something with the whole of your heart. When you've thrown that in, then everything else will look after itself. So I wonder whether that might be just an inkling in terms of what we might want to focus on in terms of enabling ourselves to get through disorder in the future and more of the stuff. Thank you ever so much.